I'm Dave Laird.
I'm Matt Booker.
And welcome to a Best of 2017 episode where we talk about stuff that was cool last year. You're listening to The Great Concavity. Well, Happy New Year, Matt.
Happy New Year. Yeah, we're a little bit into 2018, but
yeah, about 10 days in. We're slightly late, but I think that's okay.
I don't think you can really assess 2017 until it's over anyway. So
yeah, it's got to be over, and you need a little bit of time to let things percolate, right? To reflect.
That's
if you
right.
If you did this like on New Year's Eve, I don't think it would cut it. You know, the mustard and all that.
I agree. You have to wait a few days.
Yeah, but so as you've hopefully deduced and inferred at this point, this is a podcast in which generally we talk about the American writer David Foster Wallace, about his work and about his life and legacy. Occasionally we talk about other things around sort of the periphery of that or around his themes. And this episode is an annual thing that we've done where we get to sort of extend that even a little bit further into the margins. So we have other interests, believe it or not, outside of David Foster Wallace and Wallace studies. And so we're going to talk a little bit about books we liked this last year, Matt, and maybe some music and perhaps some films and TV shows and video games. The last few of which you don't really do, Matt. You just read,
Sorry.
And that's your whole life. But I have a couple other interests, I guess, which I can mention. We'll talk about other podcasts. You listen to podcasts.
Yeah, I do have some podcasts on my list. And I was going to say some of my comments will relate back to David Foster Wallace.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's the hope.
But much of it is like other people who read Wallace. They all read other stuff too. So
yeah, I would hope so. I feel like it'd be a bit narrowed to just read Infinite Jest as over and over as the only book ever.
That would be very narrow-minded.
It would be. We don't want that. I forgot to mention, this is episode 35. So let's talk briefly,
35,
Matt.
is that right? 35?
35 is right, I think. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the Oz Wallace one was 34. So here we are, episode 35. That's where we're at. So Matt, briefly, any life highlights from last year before we get into the books?
Life highlights. Let's see.
Like geopolitics aside.
I mean, for one,
sorry we have to say that every year.
Yeah,
We've just kind of been shaken out.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. I'll give you a couple. I mean, for me, one was going to the David Foster Wallace conference in Illinois in June.
Yeah, me too.
That was an experiential highlight for sure. Mm-hmm. And anyone who listens to this show is absolutely welcome and should attend. And I bet you most of the people who have attended have listened to this podcast because we forced it upon them during the conference by recording a live episode as part of the conference proceedings.
Yeah.
So I would say
one way to get an audience, amen.
Darn near 100%. At least have heard one episode of it.
Yeah.
But I would say another one, a big highlight for me, another big highlight is the Texas Book Festival. So me living in Austin, Texas, and having like 300 or 400 writers come to Austin every year. And past, I don't know, 6, 7 years, 8 years, it's been great for me to be somewhat involved as a moderator.
Yep.
And so this year I got to moderate a panel with Gabe Habash, author of Stephen Florida, and Simeon Marsalis, author of As Lies to Grin. And I'll talk about both of those books a little bit later, but
cool.
That for me is like a life highlight. What about you?
Yeah, I'd say so. Life highlights for me were, so before Flannery was born in March, some friends of mine threw something called a baby bachelor party for me, which is something they do for a guy before his first baby arrives. It's kind of like the idea is that it's maybe more important than like your bachelor party before you get married, because your life really changes when you have a kid more than it does when you get married.
That's true.
Yeah, so we rented this cabin on a nearby island near Vancouver Island, and just rented this crazy awesome place, and went to this frisbee golf course in the woods that has 27 holes, and just did that and hung out, played games, and drank good beer, and it was awesome. So that was a great time. And then having a child, of course, was maybe even a more memorable experience.
Congrats,
So,
Dave!
yes.
Had his first offspring.
Yeah. So in April we had Flannery, and that's been a really cool 9 months since then, man. It's been different than anything I've experienced to this point, in a way that is more significant and magical than pretty much anything else. So that's been cool. Of course, the ISU conference was amazing. I had the really bad realization on the last day when we were hanging out downtown in Bloomington that I wouldn't be able to go next year in 2018. And the plot thickens in that looks like we're going to be in New Zealand probably for 3 years now for Rachel to do her PhD. So I'm probably going to miss 3 in a row here by the look of it. But
it's a long time, Dave.
It's a long time. Fingers crossed for an Australian Wallace conference that I can hop over to that coincides with our schedule. So, that'd be good. Life lowlight for me this year is maybe as a result of having a child, I did not go to Netrunner Worlds this year in November. Kind of a lowlight. But then something really cool happened. Like, I think it was about in the last week of December, Robin O'Neill put a contest on Twitter, which was if you could name what TV show the still that she put up was. And so I was sitting there on our Concavity Twitter just waiting for it, because I saw it on Instagram like 5 minutes before. And it was a picture of this show called Today's Special, which I'm very familiar with growing up. It's a Canadian TV show. It's about this mannequin that comes to life in a department store every night. And
you don't have to explain it to me, Dave.
I'm aware.
I was a fan.
We've talked about this. So I saw it, and instantly I just wrote Today's Special, Dave, from our account. And so I was the first person. And so Robin is making me a unique commissioned drawing, which is so rad. I can't wait for it. And so she asked what I wanted. So Rachel and I talked about it, and we thought it'd be cool for her to do, one of her landscapes with the sweatpant guys, which I love, but to have characters from Today's Special in it. And then maybe also she had the idea of throwing in maybe a few characters from, say, Infinite Jest, maybe a few other like pop culture things that we've connected over, like Twin Peaks or something like that. So I'm very excited to see what she dreams up for that, and to receive it. So another little life highlight there. So thanks, Robin. And yeah.
That leads me into my discussion of best books of 2017.
Right on.
Which at the top of the list was Robin O'Neill's book.
I have that on mine too. Not a novel, which
20 years of drawing.
20 years of drawings.
And definitely a life highlight was getting to meet Robin in Austin and have her sign a book for me and a book for you.
Yeah, and, which is so generous. Again, thank you so much for sending that up.
And I am legitimately thrilled that this book exists out in the world. And obviously we love her work. It's the logo of our show.
Yep.
And we hope that other people like her work and buy her book. We'll put a link to it in the show notes here.
Definitely.
But it is a highlight for me to see all of her work kind of in one place, because before I had experienced it kind of in all different contexts.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you what was kind of your favorite drawing or set of drawings in that book, because for me, the stuff that I like, and maybe you've already alluded to it, but my favorite stuff in there is actually the landscapes where there's like very little happening. She's got some drawings, right, where there's tons of people, and they're moving
really
all around.
Busy. Yeah.
And those are super interesting because especially if you see them at full size or you see close up and you can get close to them, there's tons of detail in them that you can really examine. It's hard to see them in a book. But for me, the ones that are really quiet and still, I think are really interesting to me in a way that I go back to those more than the ones with like the little guys, even though I like the little guys a lot. I like the little
Hell
guys.
and
and the hell, but I like the the animals too. She's got some with like a horse,
Yeah.
A dinosaur, and I
Yeah.
really like
The owl.
the animals a lot.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, my favorite ones are. I mean, I tend to gravitate towards art that's really busy. I really love Peter Bruegel for that reason, and most of the contemporary artists that I like kind of follow in that similar vein. I'm just looking through her site right now, trying to find the one of there's like all the little men flying up to the mountain. It's like a grassy landscape in the foreground, and then this like very distant set of mountain ranges. I'm not seeing it on her site, but that one is in my top 2, and then of course the one that our logo is based on. But yeah, the sweatsuit guys kill me. I just love them. They remind me of Chaz Tenenbaum from the Royal Tenenbaums. I just think of like a bunch of little Uzi and Aries and Chazes running around.
Yes. But she told a great story.
Things.
In Austin, she gave a brilliant talk before she did a book signing, and
right.
she explained some of the characters' names in the book, because those little guys they reoccur, so some of them do have names, and one of them's named is Miami Dave, and she was saying that she was like during the 2000 election, the recount was like listening to the TV kind of half interestedly, and overheard them. They kept talking about Miami-Dade County, like recounts. And she's like, are they saying Miami-Dave? And she's like, that's an awesome name. Like, who's Miami-Dave? Had to be told that it was Miami-Dade, so she named one of those guys in the sweatsuit the Miami-Dave.
Oh, that's amazing. Nice. Yeah, she also gave us a very lovely shout out on one of her recent episodes. So right back at you, Robin.
And I would put that as a podcast. If listeners like our podcast, they should definitely listen to Me Reading Stuff by Robin O'Neill. You can search for it in iTunes or Google Play or whatever, and Me Reading Stuff will come up with pretty entertaining podcast from Robin O'Neill.
So fun, so funny, so poignant. She talks about Wallace sometimes. She reads Wallace sometimes. And we've become quite good friends through the internet, and now you've met her, so that's really rad. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was at the top of my list, was Robin O'Neill book. What else did you have at the top of your list, Dave?
All right. A couple books I read this year, mostly on account of, things you've recommended over the last while, or things that people I've met at Wallace conferences have talked about or recommended. I read 1004 by Ben Lerner this year, which I thought was, pretty great. We've talked about it on the show briefly, I think. I think we talked about it with Lucas Thompson. And I think he's the one who mentioned it to me the first time I heard about it. It reminded me a lot of this book called Thieves of Manhattan. Have you ever read that?
I have not.
Adam Langer, I think his name is. Just like a book about a guy writing a book, basically, like with book grant money that he got. I thought that book was cool. Marfa Texas is in it. We've talked about that recently.
Yeah, I think that 1004 is in contention for one of the great Marfa novels, right? Yeah. Chris Kraus, I Love Dick. I don't know. That would be in contention as well. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've not read that. I've heard of that. Yeah, I haven't read it though.
It was also made into an Amazon TV show with Kevin Bacon.
The Golden Globes, it was nominated for stuff.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon plays Dick, and if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it.
Oh, you watched the show?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing.
All right, Matt Booker.
Actually, that was so now I'm done. I said one TV show.
Does it have to be based on a novel for you to watch the show version?
Yes. Okay. Or it could be a documentary about a writer, of which I have another one I'll mention later. But
good. All right.
No, cool. 1004 is a good one, but, keep going.
Yeah. I read The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson this year, which I alluded to this at my talk at the ISU conference, that I kind of set my talk up as kind of a series of vignettes, like life vignettes in the style of that book. So I quite like that. Read a couple of George Saunders books this year, Civil War Land in Bad Decline, and of course Lincoln in the Bardo, which I loved. It's probably my favorite book this year. And if you haven't read Civil War Land in Bad Decline, go get it. And especially that title story is, I think, one of his best stories for sure. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely one of his best things ever.
Yeah, it's outrageously good. So those were. I'll stop there, let you do a few, and then we can bounce it back over or something.
Yeah, I really liked Sea Oak too, a story he wrote called Sea Oak, which I think they made into a movie recently or a TV show or something. I haven't seen it, but I was like, I don't know how they could do it. But
where did that appear? It was like in some publication, right?
Yeah, it was in a journal. We'll have to link to it in the show notes. But I think there is a Wallace reference in that story, by the way. Yeah. In the story, there's a reference to Self-Storage Parkway, which is a reference that Wallace, I think, picked up and used in The Pale King.
Oh, yeah.
So it's pretty small, but I noticed it.
Yep. Sweet.
So I've got like several categories of books, and I'm going to start with like things that came to mind immediately when I said what were like memorable reading experiences of books published in 2017. And so I mentioned Gabe Habash. I read his book for the Texas Book Festival, but I also read it before that just because I wanted to read it. And I know Gabe through Publishers Weekly, and I was really looking forward to his book coming out, I think in June, late May. And it's called Steve in Florida. And I think there are also some Infinite Jest references in his book, but I won't give them away. Nice. But it's also a book about a wrestler in college who is just obsessed with winning the championship for his weight class. And the voice in it is just super unique. You know, it's not like a literary person. It's a wrestler, right? And it's so well done in order to kind of maintain that voice throughout the whole novel and still keep it interesting and, you know, somehow add some literary qualities to it. So there is a lot of little asides and voices and stuff that come out in that book. So I really like it and recommend it.
Awesome.
Now, interestingly, his wife, Julie Bunton, also published a novel last year called Marlena. Yeah. And I really loved that book. And I gave it to my wife, and she read that book, and she also really loved it. And I'm not going to do a plot summary of the book. It's about a girl, high school age in Minnesota, and it's kind of a coming of age, and it's about like kind of losing a friend in high school. And it's not a YA book though. It is very much I felt like a literary novel, and I really enjoyed getting invested in those characters. Cool. And I really would point to that book. Anything else Julie writes, like I would buy sight unseen after reading that.
Wow.
So that was probably my top two novels.
Cool.
I have two nonfiction books I want to mention, and then I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right.
One is Sarah Gerard, who I think I've mentioned on the show before, but she wrote a novel called Binary Star that is fantastic. If you haven't read it, it's amazing. She did like graduate work in astrophysics. And,
cool.
But it's also about like a male and a female being like binary stars and having kind of a toxic relationship. But her new book is called Sunshine State, and it's a book of essays about the state of Florida and growing up in Florida. And Sarah Gerard, I would say, is in that category of like whatever she does, I will buy it, sight unseen. And I did get to meet her at the Texas Book Festival this year, which was fantastic.
Nice. Cool.
And but I really recommend her writing. The other nonfiction book I want to mention is Stephen Moore published a new book in 2017. It's a really thick compendium called My Back Pages, and Stephen Moore is well known in Wallace circles for being the managing editor of the Review of Contemporary Fiction and really one of the first readers of Infinite Jest. And he published that essay on the Howling Fantods about comparing the first draft of Infinite Jest to the published book and what made the cut and what didn't. And for this book, he's revised that essay somewhat and expanded it and included several other essays on Wallace. And he's also a major scholar of William Gaddis and has also written extensively on other postmodernists, including David Markson, including Alexander Theroux, Gilbert Sorrentino. So his taste really aligns with mine, and I really love this collection. He's collected all of his book reviews, all of his sort of literary essays into one.
Oh yeah, nice.
One fat book. And if you also haven't seen his history of the novels, there's like I think 3 volumes now, 2 volumes that are just amazing. We talked about this at the conference, Dave. I don't know if you were there, of like talking about Stephen Moore's history of the novel books, but they're incredible.
Where did the conversation occur? Was it like on the back porch of the rental house?
You know what? Now that I think about it, this was actually a conversation we had probably 2 or 3 years ago at the Hilton there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or at the Marriott, when it was at the Marriott, that conference. But I remember talking to several people, including I think Tom Moore and Alex Moran, about these books. So
good dudes.
If you haven't read Stephen Moore, you should, and if you have, you should definitely pick up My Back Pages. It kind of flew under the radar, but he did have an interview on Bookworm with Michael Silverblatt talking about it in April. So
that'll put you on the map
for real.
For real.
For real. So that's kind of like some highlights for me were reading all those books.
Was there a new Knausgaard book this year, Matt? Or no?
So there was a book 5 paperback came out in 2017, and so a lot of people just like the design of the paperbacks better. So I buy the paperbacks too, and maybe I finished it before then, but I've read. We should get in the fall of 2018. We should get book 6. And that will be very exciting. But yes, Knausgaard did also come out with these new books that are like the seasons. There's one called Autumn, one called Winter, but they're pretty underwhelming, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So I didn't put that on my list, but book 5 I thought was amazing. And anyone who wants to talk about book 5, like, let's take this offline and we could just do a whole nother podcast about it. I mean, it's
is there like a subreddit about him, about these books?
There is. And I subscribe to it, and I have posted in it. Yes.
And you manage the listserv for it as well.
Not quite, but
wouldn't surprise me, dude. Wouldn't surprise me.
I have started a little project of mapping out a lot of the locations in Norway that go through the series.
Oh yeah.
And he moves back and forth in Sweden and travels a bit in Denmark and in Europe, but really in Norway, I really have got interested in just the geography of those books, because it's pretty integral, I think, to the whole read is the locations that he describes. He's pretty vivid. So.
His sense of place is inherent to like who he is as a person, I'd imagine.
Yes, very much.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Have you ever been to Norway?
No.
Yeah, me neither. I'd like to go. Sounds expensive though. But we have been to Sweden about 5 or 6 times. And
what?
Yeah, we have some really good friends that live there, so we went there for their wedding, and then a bunch of other times when we've kind of been in Europe, and when we lived in Israel, we went there a couple times and stuff like that. So hit up Denmark for a week too, and that was amazing, but not Norway yet. So it's up there.
Yeah, I just haven't been a big traveler, to be honest with you. But
yeah, I mean, Austin sounds pretty good, so you don't really need to leave too much.
I just like being at home.
Yeah, that's good too.
But I also don't like if you get that far north, like the sun sets at like 4 p.m.
Yeah. Or conversely, at night it sets at like midnight. So there were times, like in Sweden in the summer, it'd be 1 a.m. and it'd just be getting like kind of dark, and it'd be dark for about 3 hours, and then 4 a.m. it would just like sunrise would come again. It's weird.
I like more consistency than that, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hard to sleep with all that light. But yeah. The Familiar. Have you been reading the Danielewski novel series?
Oh man, so no.
I know those have a lot of Wallace references going on.
Yeah, and I want to.
I haven't either yet.
And I've sort of thought like I should retire a year early so that I could just sit down and read all of them. I mean, it's right up my alley. Like I want to read it. I love House of Leaves. Mm-hmm. Some of his other stuff is a little bit too weird for me. Like it's more of the form factor rather than the book. But The Familiar, from what I've dipped into a little bit, actually looks really interesting, and it's more straightforward narrative, I think, than like the 50-Year Sword. I don't know if you read that one.
Yeah, I read that one.
Anyways, I really want to get into that, but I've not picked it up.
Dipped.
So.
There's 5 books now, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a bit of an undertaking. Yeah. I read the Flannery O'Connor short story collection, A Good Man Is Hard to Find, from cover to cover for the first time this year, and that is a ride.
It should be right up your alley.
Yeah, it's good. I particularly love the story called Good Country People, which is about a kind of quite a spinster, I mean, I guess for the time, but this woman who's like in her early 30s, living with her mom, she's unmarried, and this Bible salesman, comes to the door and like stays for dinner and stuff, and basically eventually like goes in this kind of romantic escapade with the daughter, and like talks her into what she thinks is going to be sleeping with him in this barn. Do you know this story?
I read this in college like 20 years ago, Dave.
But instead what he does is he gets her to a point where she's willing, and then he steals her prosthetic leg and runs away with it, and that's like the ending of the story. She just gets rused by this Bible salesman, and he just keeps her leg. That was pretty great. I don't
Super
know
romantic.
what it means. I mean, it's obviously about the darkness of human nature, and that you can't trust anyone, even a Bible salesman who obviously has ulterior motives. But that was a fun read. We read it out loud to Flannery when she was about 4 days old or 3 days old or something, and that was her first story.
Wow.
Yeah, starting it off right, you know what I'm saying? I also read Don DeLillo's Great Jones Street, which we talked about with Matt Luder, because him and I had that book challenge where I had to read that, which was very happy to do, and then he read the instructions by Adam Levin, which is about 8 times longer. Always love some DeLillo. And then, speaking of books that have Wallace references, I read The Sellout by Paul Beatty. My thesis supervisor emailed me about it this year, put me onto it, and I like that book a lot too. That was a good one, about kind of race relations in the U.S. and
yeah, that was on my list. I still haven't got to it, but I want to read that. Yeah.
It's quite funny. It's very satirical. I think you'd probably dig it. Have you got into the Eugenides book, Fresh Complaint, yet? The short stories?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. I read the first 3, and then it got recalled from the library, so I can't say I've fully read it, but what I did read was pretty good. I liked it.
I gotta say, I didn't love the marriage plot, and
really?
No, and after that, I was like,
even though Wallace is kind of a cipher character there,
maybe because
even though he denies it, because Leonard.
No, I just didn't love it, and I mean, it was just all right for me, and so I don't know. I just moved on from Eugenides for a bit. I mean, maybe I'll come back to it, but I just didn't love it.
Yeah.
I did read Steve Erickson. His new book is called Shadow Bond. Did we talk about this?
I've been wanting to read that. We haven't taltalked about it too much, but it has come up.
It's really trippy,
on my list.
man. Yeah, I was really excited when I just even read like the summary of what this book was about. So for people who don't know, the book was about the Twin Towers just suddenly reappear in North Dakota, South Dakota, and they're completely real, and they're there, and they're completely unoccupied except for one person on one of the top floors in a conference room is the stillborn twin of Elvis Presley.
Oh my gosh.
And so
what a premise.
Right. So Elvis Presley, when he was born, he did have a twin who died. And this book is about that kid. But like Elvis's music still sort of exists in this world. And it's kind of hard to describe because there's like elements of pure fantasy in it, and then there's elements of pure reality where people are driving down the street and are like, or the highway, and they're like, oh my God, there's Twin Towers.
Magical realism.
If you've read Erickson's other books, some of them I think they kind of fit with this kind of narrative style that he has. But I thought this was him just totally confident and having fun and just experimenting at his best. So I thought it was really well done. Shadow Bond.
That's cool. That kind of, the description of what you just gave reminds me of something that like Chris Adrian would write. Who's been published by McSweeney's a couple times.
Yeah, we've talked about Chris Adrian. I like him. Yeah. I've only read the Children's Hospital.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you read A Naked Singularity by Sergio de la Pava?
So that book, yes.
Any good?
I gotta say, oh man, what's the story? So the story is, I got this book a long time ago, probably 4, 5, 6. I don't remember. Whatever he first wrote it.
2013, I think maybe.
Before that.
Okay.
His wife was his publicist, and he self-published an edition
2008. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so back then, like 10 years ago, right? He self-published it, and he sent out some galleys, and I got one of them. And I was like, what is this self-published galley I'm getting in the mail? And like, I read a little bit of it, and I was like, nah, it's not for me. And I totally sold it. I got rid of it. And like, now I'm kicking myself because I was like, so many people have recommended it to me. I wish I had kept it so I could pick it up and give it another try. But I gave it a try, and I was like, nah, it's kind of like a loose, baggy monster, which I often like books like that. Not always, but usually. And that one, I don't know. I was just like, maybe it was the packaging of the book or something. It turned me off.
Did you say a loose, baggy monster?
Yeah, I didn't come up with that. I'm stealing that.
Is that like the form of the book, or is that like what the book's about?
No, it's the form of the book. It's a loose, baggy monster.
Is that what Infinite Jest is? Is it a loose, baggy monster?
Kind of.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I mean, it's kind of loose in that it's like all the parts are not tightly assembled. You know, they're kind of loose.
Yeah. Huh. I like it.
It's kind of baggy. It's kind of a monster. You know, it's 1,000 pages. I think Naked Singularity is like 900 pages.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've just kind of seen it around in a couple places lately and have been interested in looking at it.
Did you pick it up?
No, I haven't. So the 3 books that I went to buy on Boxing Day, which is something you guys don't have in the U.S., but it's kind of like Black Friday here. It's the day after Christmas.
Never heard of it.
All the stores have like their big blowout sales. So I went to a good bookstore looking for Shadowbond, specifically that book, and then The Mystery Doc. Do you know that one? Speaking of really huge books.
I am aware of it. I have not read it.
Okay, yeah.
The guy
I think Matt Luter read it this year, and I'd seen it in a couple other places. But that book was $40 on the shelf, and it came in like Saran wrap basically because it's so big. They got to contain it somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about it, but yeah, just wondering if you read it.
I want it. No, I read Stephen Moore reviewed it in the Washington Post.
Oh yeah.
And I really trust his reviews, and he was pretty generous to it because it didn't get a lot of high-profile reviews like that, and so it was on my radar last, in the fall, I guess around November, December, and I will get to it eventually, but it looks really interesting to me. Yeah. It looks kind of structured similar to Evan Dara's Lost Scrapbook. I don't know if you've read that.
I have not.
You should.
All my blind spots come out every year on this episode, and I just cry in shame in the corner after.
It's all right. You're going to talk about music, and I'm just going to keep my mouth shut for like 15 minutes. So.
Oh, that's good. I got one more book on my list, Skippy Dies. It's the book that I'm currently reading right now. We talked about it with Tim Groenland in like episode 4 or 5.
Yeah, Paul Murray.
Yeah, Paul Murray, set in Ireland. It's quite funny. I'm about a third of the way through it. About 200 and something pages, and quite liking it. It reminds me in some ways of Infinite Jest, like the Enfield Tennis Academy kids. It's a bunch of kids like with wild hormones and being hilarious, and it's kind of got that vibe to it. So that's good.
I didn't put any books on my list that I have not finished, Dave. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I started reading this book maybe in like September, October, and I'm only like a third of the way through it because Instagram just eats all my time, and I just sad about my life that I don't read more books. No,
you have a baby, man. You're in the shit right now. It's very hard to find time.
Yeah. Any others stand out for you that you read this year, Matt?
So yeah, I do have
45 others.
A little bit more. Well, I tried to just go off of memory, and so I have another category of books, and there are 4 or 5 books in this category which are not super literary, I think. But this is just to show that like I don't just read highbrow fiction.
You're not a total snob.
Right. And I actually enjoy reading for all sorts of reasons and purposes. And I know most readers that I like, they do the same thing, and they learn new things, and they introduce me to new things. So anyways, with that said, here's the 4 books that I read that were not super literary but interesting and worth putting on my end of year list. One is Tom Perrotta's new book called Mrs. Fletcher. I don't know if you've read Tom Perrotta, who wrote Election and Little Children and Abstinence Teacher, but I've read all of his books. I love him. To me, he's kind of like middlebrow, but whenever he comes out with a new book, I inevitably buy it right away and read it in like a weekend, and I just devour it. Yeah. So I recommend Tom Perrotta in general, but his new book, Mrs. Fletcher, is also really good.
Cool. It's fiction?
It's a novel, correct. Yep. It's a fiction. There's also 3 nonfiction books I will mention. One is called The Long Haul by Finn Murphy. And this is a nonfiction book about being a long haul truck driver. Oh, cool. And I learned a lot from this book, and I thought it was really well done. And I just devoured it. I couldn't get enough of his voice. And he is a mover, so he's like moves someone's house and packs it into like 18-wheeler and drive it across the country. And he sort of talks about how prestigious that is amongst truck drivers, but also how stressful and hard it is. And it's just, it reminds me of like John McPhee books. But I recommend that book, Finn Murphy. Cool. Another one I really devoured was called The Stranger in the Woods by Michael Finkel. And this is the story of the North Pond hermit who was discovered in Maine as living in the woods for like 30 years, undiscovered. I mean, he was discovered.
Like David Thoreau or something.
You mean
he read Walden?
Henry David Thoreau? No. Well, what's interesting about this guy is that he didn't really give a crap about any of that, and ultimately he was like a thief because he survived off of like breaking into other people's homes and stealing their food. But he just, I can't imagine spending one night outside in Maine, like it's so cold. But this dude spent 30 winters in a row and survived outdoors in Maine. Like it's phenomenal.
Crazy.
But just reading about his story of like how he did that and why, it was fascinating.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
And then the 4th book in this category that I will mention is also set partly in Maine, which is John Hodgman's new book called Vacation Land. And I devoured this book. I really loved it. And it's a little different than his other books, which I also love, very much a sense of humor that jives with mine. But he writes essays kind of about being an adult, being a parent.
Oh, yeah, that's your wheelhouse.
That is definitely my wheelhouse. And especially just, his mother dies, and then he inherits a house and sells it and spends the summer up in Maine, along with another writer, Ben Marcus, is up there in Maine and talks about renting a house for the summer in Maine and coming back to New York. And it's just very, very much his voice. And I'm the target audience for this guy. Like I've been a fan of John Hodgman going back into 1999. I remember meeting him in New York whenever he was writing for McSweeney's. It was an early website. Believe it or not, the web did exist in 1999.
I remember, yeah.
And he used to write a column for McSweeney's called Ask a Former Professional Literary Agent.
Oh, that sounds good.
And most of the questions revolved around whether or not The Lord of the Rings was a single novel or a trilogy.
Okay.
Literally every week the question would be like, is The Lord of the Rings a single? It would be like a long build-up, but ultimately the question would be like, is it a trilogy or a novel?
Awesome.
And my wife actually worked in book publishing as an editorial assistant at Penguin in New York in the late 90s and has some interactions with him before he was a former professional literary agent, but a current professional literary agent.
Right, yeah.
And in this book, he talks a little bit about being a literary agent and why he left that business, which I found super fascinating to read, like 19 years after the fact, or
Yeah, no kidding.
18 years after the fact. So.
Yeah, no doubt.
So that's it for me in terms of books. I do have a few more to mention, but I'm going to let you talk for a bit now.
We speaking of Lord of the Rings, every time we mention to someone that we're going to New Zealand, the first, like, without fail, the first thing they ask, "Are you going to go to Hobbiton?" Yep. I'm just like, no. I don't even know where it is. It's a huge country. I mean, I'm probably not going to go there. So, I mean, the world is quite obsessed, you know, with well, at least Peter Jackson. I don't know about Tolkien, but I think so.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about it for books for me that I read in the last year. I hope to read more in 2018, and I think that I probably will, because we're going to a city in New Zealand that I know 0 people in, and I imagine I'll have a little bit more free time. So that's one of my goals. Just get a library card and just start hitting it hard.
Yeah, you should. I have one movie to mention and then another set of books. So cool. Maybe if you want to transition to movies.
Sure. Yeah, that's probably the closest analog to literary fiction is the film. So what was your movie, Matt? Is it Madagascar 2?
No, I did see The Last
Dory.
Jedi. Star Wars. I did see that. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's fun, right?
Like it was very fun, and it was, adults could enjoy it as well as children.
Yeah. Was Star Wars like a really big part of your childhood? Do you have a lot of nostalgia for it?
Very much.
Okay. I don't. I never watched it as a kid. I watched it, I think, in my early 20s. I was like, I hear about Star Wars a lot. I should probably watch these movies. So I watched them like when I was 21 or something. Yeah. So I don't have quite the same fascination as a lot of my friends do with it. But for what it's worth, I thought the movie was fun. Some of the visuals were really compelling.
No, I think it might have been my first movie.
Yeah.
So whenever I was about a year old, my brother was 4. He begged to go, and we were living in Colorado and Denver, and we have pictures, like this is 1977, and we have pictures like with Darth Vader. Like there was a guy dressed up as Darth Vader in the lobby of the theater.
Oh, that's cool.
So no, for years, like 1981 Christmas, I think it was Christmas 81. I got the AT-ATs, the walkers.
Yeah.
So I have
were like
pictures
6 or something at the time.
Yeah, I got pictures on my Flickr account of like me opening those Star Wars toys. So it was that was like very common. There's nothing unique about that. But.
Right. Oh, that's cool. There's a guy in Victoria, the city I live in, who he's downtown often, sort of in the really like high traffic tourist area by the Parliament buildings, who's dressed as Darth Vader, and he plays a violin. But he doesn't play like nice classical music. He plays like really dark, like avant-garde type stuff. Like sounds like Godspeed You Black Emperor, if you're familiar with that band from Montreal. Just like kind of anarchist, like post-rock stuff. And it's probably like the coolest thing that's going on in the city that I can think of.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to see. It's like hundreds of tourists, and he's just playing this like really off-the-wall stuff. Rules.
I have to say that was actually not what I wanted to talk about. Star Wars was the one movie I had to recommend was I watched on Netflix, and it's this Joan Didion documentary called The Center Will Not Hold. So I'm a big Joan Didion fan, and getting to see her nephew Griffin Dunn produced and directed the documentary, and I just love that. I don't know if you'd get as much out of it if you're not already a Joan Didion fan.
Right, yeah.
But I just paused it and rewatched parts of it. Oh, cool. And I really, if you are a fan, I think that it will be very moving and touching to hear her talk about her daughter and, her husband and her life. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's my movies. That's the sum total of my movies that I want to talk about. As I mentioned, I have really bad taste in music, and just don't.
I don't think you have bad taste. I just don't think you prioritize those things as much as you do, reading.
Oh, that's partly true. I just also don't really know how to talk intelligently about music. So I learn a lot from you in each one of these. Like anytime you put out, you're gonna put out like a Spotify playlist or Apple Music or something, right?
It's ready to rock. I've been working on this best of year playlist all year for you guys. We're gonna put it link in the show notes. This time I guess it is. Yeah, you didn't have any last minute additions, hey? You can let me know and I'll throw it.
I thought about it. I looked at my phone and I was like, not even gonna go there. Just gonna let Dave rock it.
Cool. In terms of movies that I saw this year that I thought were great, Moonlight was very high on that list for me. Did you get a chance to see that? It won
I want
Best
to.
Picture.
It looks good. Yeah, it looks good.
In a very weird twist. Do you remember the debacle on stage that happened at the Oscars last year?
I did see the highlight reel of that.
Yeah, that was something. I also watched this like 2 weeks ago, this mockumentary film from New Zealand. I had a friend who was like, oh, if you're going to New Zealand, watch What We Do in the Shadows. It's a mockumentary about vampires who live in New Zealand.
Wow.
And it is amazing. Like if you've ever seen the Christopher Guest movies like Best in Show or A Mighty Wind, this is very kind of similar, but even more absurd because it's about actual vampires with like vampire powers. So it's kind of, magic realism. It's really funny and good. It's on Netflix, so you can check it out.
What's it called again?
What We Do in the Shadows.
What We Do in the Shadows. Okay.
The guy who directed Thor Ragnarok this year, he also directed this. I can't remember his name. It's kind of an off-the-wall name. And also it's got one of the guys from Flight of the Conchords is in it, Jermaine.
I've seen that show, yeah.
Yeah. So the taller guy with the glasses, he's one of the main characters in it, and he's very funny. Another comedy that I liked this year was The Big Sick, which is about a guy who's like dating this girl, and she, gets kind of a terminal illness, and about him and her parents, and they're an interracial couple, so there's like all kinds of race politics involved, and it's very funny and quite charming. I saw a couple other like dramas like Manchester by the Sea, Hell or High Water, Anomalisa, which is the Charlie Kaufman film with the puppets, which we talked about with Allard a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, he liked that.
I liked all those films. Manchester by the Sea I thought was really interesting because it was some of the scenes in it are so funny, and then alternatingly some of the scenes are some of the most gut-wrenching things I've ever seen on screen. So it's really this roller coaster ride of just getting yanked from like one emotion to another, and it's just like a really weird emotional experience to watch it. Some of the acting in it, like Michelle Williams, there's a scene with her that it's like, this is the best acting I've probably ever seen in my life. So that was one of the highlight films that I saw. It was also up for Best Picture last year.
Right.
Yeah. So those are a few movies that I got around to. Do you want to go to music? Do you want to go to television, podcasts?
So I will go to a couple podcasts that I liked, and then I will go back to. I still have one category of books that,
all right, cool.
I'll come back to. So for podcasts, to me, the highlight of the year was really S-Town.
S-Town.
And so I just loved this show, partly because I grew up in rural Texas, and I felt like a lot of the kind of flavor of the small town life he got really right. And East Texas, if you have not been there to the backwoods that borders Louisiana, it is the deep South. So Texas is big enough to where it's got the West, it's got coastal areas, it's got northern plains, and it's got the deep South in it. And I just thought it was very literary too, the way the story was told, totally. And the kind of allusions to Faulkner that were there. I don't know if you've read A Rose for Emily I went back and read that after the kind of outro song of the podcast was A Rose for Emily, and the story, you see why they chose that after you go back and read it. I also really like this show called Reply All. Dude,
that's on my list too.
Reply All.
Episodes 102 and 103 are the only ones I've listened to.
Is this in India where he goes to India? Oh my God.
That's the one. It's so good.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like all their episodes, but I mean that was definitely some of the highlights of the year for me.
Oh man.
And the guy Alex Goldman,
I love him. He's so funny.
I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but he's a big DFW fan.
Oh my gosh, let's get him on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Alex.
I want to talk about video games with him. I mean,
you're formally invited onto the show, right? But no, he's definitely posted about Infinite Jest and Wallace a few times.
Oh, excellent.
But that Reply All, if you haven't listened to it, it's one of the just general best podcasts around.
Michael O'Connell put me onto it. I think he posted on Facebook or something. I saw it. And
really?
Listened. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is great.
So I really like that show, Reply All. And I also really like a show called Heavyweight. Mm-hmm. I think it came out in 2016. This
sounds familiar. Yeah, what's it about again?
And it's like one guy, and each episode is him trying to like help someone right a wrong. And it's like kind of lifting this heavy weight off of them. Like something bad happened in the past.
I see what you did there.
And it's it's all true story stuff, and it's just super good, like well told stories that somehow keep you engaged throughout the whole time. Like I listen to each one, and I'm like, I'm not really interested if I just read the description, you know. But then when I listen to the show, I'm like, oh man, that was really good. So cool. I would recommend Heavyweight for sure.
Nice.
What about you? What else did you have?
Most of the podcasts, this won't surprise you, that I listen to are about Netrunner. Run Last Click, shout out to you guys. Terminal 7, Theophilus Bagpiper. That's it. I don't need to say anymore because no one understood a thing I just said.
Including me.
Including you. But yeah, those are the three I had at S-Town, me reading stuff, Reply All.
We did mention Robin O'Neill's podcast. Yeah,
we did. Yeah, we did.
I will also, I would give a shout out to Pinchin' in Public, but
oh yeah, totally.
We don't give a shout out to them. That's just part of our
because of our beef. Our ongoing turf war.
We're hoping to defeat them in 2018
with tridents specifically.
All out war. There was a show called The Accused. I don't know if you listened to this. It was fantastic, and it was about it's a true crime podcast called Accused.
Oh yeah,
about a kind of an unsolved murder in Cincinnati, and I am a huge fan of these kind of either shows or podcasts that take kind of an old unsolved murder that seems to be a closed case and kind of reopen it. And there was a one on Netflix, in fact, called The Keepers, about the murder of a nun. I don't know if you saw this, but that was really well done. So if you liked that, check out The Accused, which might be actually from 2016. Maybe that it's not 2017, but
cool.
Anyways, that wraps up my sort of highlights about podcasts.
Gotcha. Cool. Moving to TV, I guess that's a natural progression. No surprises here, Matt, but Nathan, for you, season 4 this year was otherworldly. The last episode is called Finding Frances, and it was like hailed in a lot of end of year TV lists, best episode of the year lists. Specifically this episode, it's 2 hours long, and it's about this recurring character that's on Nathan For You who plays a Bill Gates impersonator in real life, and this man is like is quite odd, and he makes allusions to this woman named Frances that he loved in his late teens, early 20s, and Nathan kind of keeps asking him about it because he's a recurring character, and they try and track her down. This is like 40 years later, 50 years later, and this guy's still like has this huge regret that he should have married this girl. And what happens in the episode is like, it's so compelling, so good. And really, to like Lucas Thompson's point about Nathan Fielder being kind of a Wallacian sincerist, a lot of that kind of stuff comes out in this episode that him and I were emailing about it last week. And I said, this episode really confirms your thesis at the Oz Wallace conference. So that was good. And then Matt Luter put me onto this show called Review this year. We may have talked about it on his episode. I can't remember. But it's a documentary style show where people send in things that they want the guy to review, like life things, and he goes out and reviews them. So like stealing, like shoplifting is on the first episode. So he goes out and he shoplifts some stuff. Then someone asks what it's like to be addicted to drugs. So he gets addicted to cocaine. And then the things that he gets asked to review just kind of like snowball into having higher and higher implications for this guy's own personal life. So like episode 2, he gets asked to review divorce. And so he goes home and starts this conversation with his wife that he wants to get a divorce. Like,
it's a terrible idea.
It is absurd, and it is so funny. Like, it's not a real show like Nathan For You. It's not a documentary, real life documentary show. It's a documentary style show, but it's fictional. But it is amazing. It's so funny. The ending specifically is one of the most meta, like, just super cool, weird twist endings I've ever seen on anything. So check out Review if you haven't seen that.
Is it on Netflix?
Not Canadian Netflix, but it is on, what's it called?
Hulu?
It might be on Hulu. We don't have Hulu. What's the one I can't remember the one we have. It'll come to me at some point. But it's on one that I have. Yeah. Forget about it. Curb Your Enthusiasm came back this year after like a huge hiatus. That's good.
One of my favorite shows, dude.
Yeah. Did you?
Yes, I've seen every episode of it ever.
Oh, good. Including the new season.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Wonderful. The Salman Rushdie episode. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yes.
What's the term that he uses? Fatwa bros. We're the Fatwa boys. We're the Fatwa boys.
I just love that they had Salman Rushdie on Seinfeld, and then brought him back for Curb.
That's right. So good. Obviously, Twin Peaks was on this year after 25 years. You watched the first 2 seasons way back in the teen years. Did you get around to this season yet?
I have not, so I can't really speak to it. But everyone seemed to love it. But
yeah, I dug it. I thought it was great. I mean, it continues on the theme of being like so off the wall, and there are episodes in it that are so dissimilar from all the others that are just properly bonkers, which is the mind of David Lynch, of course. But overall, loved it. Some of the cameos were amazing. Like, I don't want to spoil too many, but there's a brief Michael Cera cameo on one of the early episodes that is one of the funniest, weirdest scenes I've ever seen in any show or movie, period. So that was very up there for me. I know your brother digs The Leftovers.
Right.
The Leftovers finished this year in season 3, and Rach and I loved it. Finale was radical, and it went to places that didn't think could exist. So that is a show that's way up there for me this year. Handmaid's Tale, loved it. Very strong
it looked good,
show.
Man. I gotta go back and watch that and Alias Grace. I want to watch both of those.
Oh yeah, I've never actually read A Handmaid's Tale, but I would love to now, especially. The show's great. The Americans is a show about Soviet spies acting like Americans in the 80s in Washington, D.C. Good show this year, another solid season. And I gotta say, I mean, the show's been around for a while, but we got really into watching Jeopardy this year.
Wow.
As a result of hanging out with Rob Short and Matt Luter at the ISU conference, they both said that they tape every episode and watch every episode. Of course, Matt Luter's been a contestant on Jeopardy, which we failed to mention on his episode, but gonna drop that now. So Rach and I record it, and we keep scores, and it's been really good, man. It's so fun, and we started going to like pub quizzes with friends, and trying to really exercise that quiz muscle. And
so I did win a trivia championship this year.
Oh,
which was
wow!
Pretty, at a pub in Denver, which was pretty big.
In Denver, cool, man.
I felt pretty proud. And I did watch Jeopardy with my grandmother about 2 weeks ago, and I got to say, I nailed it.
Yeah. What do you think your percentage was of correct questions answered?
I didn't write it down, Dave, but it was pretty high.
Matt says if you can get 70 or higher, then you should be a contestant on the show.
I think I should try out. I think I should try out.
Yeah, do it, man. I bet you would nail it. You have an encyclopedic mind, to be sure.
So yeah, I love trivia. I was going to bring it back to TV shows though, and say I do remember now that you're talking. I watched one TV show that I had high hopes for, and I thought sucked. And that was the 5th season of Orange Is the New Black, which was
I agree with you. It was bad. I didn't even finish it. But
I did not finish it either.
Before it, yeah. I think I maybe watched like 4 episodes and was just like, yeah,
it was
uncompelling. Yeah.
Yeah, it came out I think in the middle of the summer, and I remember watching a few episodes and I was like, are they going to keep this riot thing going the whole time? And I was like, I just didn't care. Like I just bailed after like 4 episodes. So.
Yeah, it started to feel kind of just hokey and like, I don't know, more soap opera-y than literary, I guess.
I didn't like it. I remember maybe right around that time, maybe it was a couple months before, watching The People versus O.J. Simpson. Did you watch that?
I watched some of that. Rachel watched it, and I caught like a lot of it, but I didn't watch it, front to back like she did. But what I saw looked great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was Cuba Gooding Jr. plays O.J., and I really enjoyed that show.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So I did watch something. I forgot.
There you go. Good man. This Is Us is a show that I watched season 1 of this year, and there's one of the actors from the OJ show is on it. I can't remember his name, blanking, but that show is having become a parent in the last year. The show is about these people in the 70s or 80s who have triplets in the first episode. It's about the kids growing up, and it is so evocative, like to the point that I think maybe it's kind of it could be like campy almost, but they do such a good job of endearing the characters to you that it doesn't feel like it crosses that line too much. I haven't watched season 2 yet, but I will, because it's pretty good. And it was up for a bunch of Golden Globes and stuff too. Yeah.
Somehow that makes me think of another thing that I did watch last year, which is a documentary. I love documentaries, and it was called Get Me Roger Stone. Have you heard of this?
I've heard of that. Yeah, what is it?
So it's about Roger Stone, who was a campaign advisor to Donald Trump. And he was also, involved in Watergate somehow with Nixon, and is really just one of the dirtiest players in like Washington politics ever. Wow. And this is the documentary about him in particular, and really why he decided to join the Trump campaign, which fits right with his ethos. And I think it explains a lot about the stuff that's happening with Paul Manafort, because he had a firm with Manafort in the 80s, just catering to sort of anyone who would pay them. So if you want to get any more, something you might not read in a newspaper article now about Roger Stone, go back and watch this Netflix documentary called Get Me Roger Stone. I thought that was really fun.
Oh, cool. Did you watch the Vietnam documentary this year, the Ken Burns?
Nope.
Okay. We watched, I think, definitely one, probably 2 episodes. And, felt like a documentary about Vietnam. It was fine.
I remember.
I'm a history teacher, so I was like, yeah, this feels like something I'd show in class.
I remember looking for it, and honestly, I didn't find it comforting, like the idea of it. I was like, I got to steel myself a little bit to think about Vietnam right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
But when I do seek out comfort food on Netflix, for me, I go to Werner Herzog documentaries.
Yes. What's the volcano one? I watched that this year.
Oh yeah, Into the Inferno or something.
Yeah.
It's good, but I mean, for me, the best one is one called Happy People.
Oh yeah.
And
is that the one about technology?
No.
And computers? Okay.
No, that I didn't like that one that much. The Happy People is about a year in the taiga in Russia, and it's a documentary about people who are sort of cut off from society. And if you haven't seen it, just drop everything and just go watch that movie because it is the best.
Okay.
But Robin O'Neill went to Werner Herzog like film school.
Yeah. Yeah, she cites that as a very significant life event.
I'm super jealous of that.
Enough.
Like just even meeting him, but like studying with him is amazing.
I have a friend who does the most amazing Werner Herzog impression, and he can just riff. Like he can talk for 5 minutes in his voice, and he just all the like really hyper philosophical, hyperbolic way that Herzog speaks in. Like he can just riff. It's amazing.
I love it.
Yeah, it's really good.
I can kind of do Hank Hill from King of the Hill, but I have to have a couple of drinks before that.
All right, we'll hear it at the next ISU conference.
The next conference. But my other,
when I'm there next.
For me, the number one Herzog movie is Happy People. Number two is Cave of Forgotten Dreams, about the kind of cave paintings in France.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that's a movie I go back to a lot and I think about a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't seen it, like you should. If you have seen it, like watch it every year. Dave, have you seen this Cave of Forgotten Dreams?
I have not.
Oh my God.
I'm disgusted to admit.
Oh my God. I mean, what it makes you think is like people existed 30,000 years ago, 25,000 years ago, and this is what they were doing, and they were better at drawing than you were.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, of course.
And with a piece of like a charcoal rock.
Yeah.
And their art is more lasting than like anything any of us will create. Mm-hmm. It's phenomenal to me to watch that movie and to see those drawings and just think about why they did that, what inspired it. Mm-hmm. It's cool. A really well done documentary. But
did you like Grizzly Man?
I did like Grizzly Man a lot,
I like Grizzly Man a lot. I wrote a paper on it actually in like a Canadian film studies class in my third year back in like 2006, comparing it to this Canadian documentary called Project Grizzly, where this guy makes what he hopes to be a grizzly-proof suit, and he tries to like encounter grizzly bears in the suit and survive. So I wrote a compare-contrast piece about that. It's fun.
I took a similar class, but in 1996, and we read the Unabomber Manifesto and Encounters with the Archdruid with John McPhee and Edward Abbey. I don't know if you read Edward Abbey, but Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac. And it's really like literature of ecology type stuff where, you get into preservation more than I don't know the why of it, but there's a lot of that in there. The Grizzly Man stuff is some of my favorite. We also read the Into the Wild, which I really liked that book, John Krakauer. That was a very influential book for me.
Cool. Did you like the film version?
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was as good as the book, obviously, but I thought it was good.
Almost never. Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, what else is on your list, man? Games? What do you got left?
Let's go music. Okay.
Oh my God, we haven't even got to music. What time?
I'll do it real fast. I sent Matt some homework.
We got
a couple
plenty
weeks
of time.
Ago. Sent him the playlist. So I don't know if you listen to any of it, Matt, but here we go. Here's my top 10 favorite albums this year. My take on music this year is that in terms of albums, it was not a good year for music. There are not a lot of albums that came out this year that I'm like really thrilled about. The top 10 on this list, I think, are all good, but none of these is going to be, in my top albums of the decade list, I don't think. So anyway, for whatever that's worth. Number one favorite album of the year, probably Big Thief, Capacity. This band put out an album last year, which we talked about, called Masterpiece. And I thought Masterpiece was better than Capacity, but still, this album is fantastic. And this band obviously is very prolific, putting out 2 solid albums in back-to-back years. Way to go, guys. Number 2, Moses Sumney is an electronic artist who is kind of similar to James Blake, if you've heard of him, that guy from the UK. Sings a lot in falsetto, and there's kind of just like
Doesn't
lo-fi.
he play tennis? Is he a tennis player, James Blake?
Yes, there is an American tennis player named James Blake, but they're different James Blakes, believe it or not.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
No, I appreciate the interpolation there. This album, Aromanticism, is like, it's not something I would normally listen to. It's very stylistically different than anything I really dig. But I just kept listening to it, and a friend of mine in Vancouver saw him and said the show was one of the best things he's ever seen, hands down. And I kept listening, and by the end of the year I was like, yep, this album's amazing. Putting it up there at number 2. Number 3, Do Make Say Think, an album called Stubborn Persistent Illusions. This is a post-rock band from Toronto in Canada. Convexityites, post-rock meaning they don't have any vocals, it's just all instruments. And funny enough, Matt, we were just talking about Skippy Dies, and I was reading it today, like not only like maybe 3 hours ago, and there's an epigraph on the chapter 2 introduction from Albert Einstein, and he's talking about physics and the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. And I just looked at that, and I actually listened to this Do Make Say Think album on vinyl today at like 4 p.m. and it's called Stubborn Persistent Illusions, and it's like one of those weird life things that happens where you're like, how are these things that were so disparate, 2 minutes ago, now just suddenly like come perfectly into focus together? Weird. I don't know. Great album. Number 4, Sheer Mag. This is a band from Philadelphia. They're kind of like a scrappy rock band. The album's called Need to Feel Your Love. I bought this album twice this year because the first time I was in Vancouver, I was like on the SkyTrain checking my stop. It wasn't labeled very well. I got up to check, got off the train, forgot to go back for the records, so I left it on the train by accident. Called the transit authority, reported the lost and found. They never got it back, so I bought it again in Seattle in November. I describe this band as kind of a mix between like Thin Lizzy and like lots of like guitar licks like that, and like Jackson 5, because the vocals just kind of have a quality that sort of reminds me of Jackson 5 in a weird melodic way. So last year they had an album that was on my top 10 list as well, Sheer Mag. Number 5, Grizzly Bear. Speaking of bears and grizzlies and Werner Herzog, their album Painted Ruins this year was pretty good. Not my favorite Grizzly Bear album, but it was nice. There's some really good songs on it. Another animal-themed band at number 6, Fleet Foxes with Crack Up. Again, it's a good album.
I like them.
Yeah, I like them historically. I think this is like my least favorite album they've ever done, but it's still like good and fine. Number 7, you've probably heard of Arcade Fire before, Matt, I'd imagine.
I like them.
Yeah, I do too. I like them too. Their album this year is called Everything Now, and I thought it was quite hit or miss. Like there are some songs on it that are pretty bad. There's one called Peter Pan, and the lyrics are about him like being your Peter Pan. And it's just like, it's a bit cringy, but there's enough good songs on it to get it onto this list, I think. So my same friend in Vancouver saw them play, I think it was October, and for their stage setup, they had their stage in the middle of the arena, like in like the big bowl kind of area, and it was a boxing ring, and they just played like in this like boxing wrestling ring for like most of the show, which sounds pretty rad. So they're kind of like facing the audience on all sides from the middle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sounded pretty cool. Number 8, Mac DeMarco's album This Old Dog. Another Canadian guy from the Montreal region, but I think he lives in New York now. He's like got like really jangly, just like stoner rock. His stuff's good. It's fun. This album's, again, it's like fine, but it's not my favorite thing that he's done. And then a new artist at number 9, Phoebe Bridgers. Her album Stranger in the Alps, an album that kind of I discovered towards the end of the year, kind of grew on me. She's really dark. She reminds me a lot of Sun Kill Moon in terms of like the lyrical content of what she writes about. She writes about depression and death and all other kinds of wonders like that, as good literary fiction tends to do. And then number 10, a metal band from Salem, Massachusetts called Converge had an album called The Dusk in Us.
Did you just say Massachusetts?
Massachusetts?
That's what my mom says. I've never heard anyone else say Massachusetts.
What do you say? Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Well, I've had like a couple beers, so maybe that's why. Funny story. When I went to Minnesota last year for Netrunner Worlds. In the airport, I was going through customs, and the security guy goes, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Minneapolis." And he goes, "Where?" I said, "Minneapolis." He's like, "Man, it's Minneapolis. Minneapolis." And I was like, "Oh, my bad." For some reason, I thought it was called Minneapolis. Why would I think that?
Oh my
I don't
God,
know.
that's great.
Same
That's
reason I
great.
think it's Massachusetts. I don't know. I'm Canadian. What do I know? Anyways, this band Converge, it's like been one of my favorite metal bands for like since the year 2000. I wrote a paper about their album Jane Doe during my master's, actually, in a class that was called DIY Hardcore Punk Subcultures. And for my final project in this course, Matt, we just had to do something ourselves, like anything. That was the only parameter. So I was like, and everyone was so mad and confused. And they're like, "What do you mean we have to do something ourselves?" Like,
Do something punk.
yeah, do something. Well, not, it didn't even have to be like punk per se, but just make something, do something yourself, and then present it to the class. It felt like a, kind of like an elementary school project. So what I did is I organized and promoted a metal show, because I have some friends who play in a band called Baptist. And so I did all the promotion and stuff like that for that show, and I invited the prof out, and I got 100% on the project. He was really into it, so that was cool. This band, Converge.
I'm proud of you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. That was the best mark I ever got in anything in university, except for in my teaching degree, because everything was like 100% in that, because it's a pretty easy program. But yeah, Converge is coming to Vancouver in a week and a half, so we're going to Vancouver for next Friday to see Converge, and I expect to get my face just absolutely obliterated right off at that show, and I can't wait. So if you like metal, check out Converge. I did not put a Converge song on the playlist that's going to be coming out with this episode because it's too abrupt and polarizing compared to everything else. Like, it's too dissimilar. If you have all this kind of like, indie folk, and then all of a sudden someone is screaming themselves hoarse, it's not going to be a positive listener experience for most people, I guess. So I just decided to leave that off. But you can go check them out on the side if you like. I saw 3 live shows, Matt, that were good this year, especially good. Hot Snakes in Seattle, Kate LeBon in Vancouver, and Baptists in Victoria. Speaking of metal, they came here a couple months ago. And so that was the year in music for me.
Wow, I just have to listen to it now because I feel like you've set it up.
Okay, good. I hope I sold it a little bit.
You did. You did. I'm going to go listen to it.
Excellent.
So I just refrained from even mentioning music because I just don't know what I'm talking about. But I still have some other books. I've read a lot more books than we've mentioned. And so far, all of the other books that I've mentioned were published in 2017.
Yeah.
But there are
That's impressive.
A couple of books that I want to mention. Actually, just one book, maybe 2 that were not published in 2017 that I want to mention. I read a lot of other books not published in 2017.
Yeah. That was like all of my list almost.
Well, one that had been on my list that I finally got around to reading was Stoner by John Williams.
Oh, I've had that on my shelf for years, and I have been meaning to check it out.
And I just absolutely love this book. They're supposed to make it into a movie, and
really?
I don't really care if they do or not. Maybe it'll bring more people to the book, but this book really resonated with me. It was sort of set in the era of like my great-grandparents, and my great-grandfather lived in rural Missouri, and I found it to just be a really compelling story of one man's life. And it is also set on a campus, so it's kind of a university novel as well.
Oh, yeah.
But all of the praise that you've heard for it is like well deserved. So go read Stoner. I'd read one of his other books, Butcher's Crossing, which I loved. It's kind of a Western. It's set in, I think, Nebraska, and it's really evocative of the plains, settling the plains, and kind of butchering a lot of bison. So if you're not into that, maybe don't read it. But I was really into it, and it's like a tannery. You're
just super into bison butchery, just as a side interest. I'm scared.
Yeah, I would be down with that. So I really enjoyed that book, Stoner. The other thing I haven't talked about a little bit yet is Roberto Bolaño.
Oh yeah.
And So since I first read Bolaño in 2008, I've been obsessed with finding other, Latin American writers in his same tradition or vein. And it's really hard because there are so many writers compared to Bolaño. And then when I read them, I sort of say, wow, that was interesting, but not what I was expecting. And I've written about this a bit, and there are many really important Latin American writers who I would compare to Bolaño, but really just two that I think merit being in the same conversation with him in terms of, if you liked Savage Detectives and 2666, you might like these other people.
Oh, good. Okay, I like where this is going.
And the two that I'm going to mention are Sergio Pitol, Pitol, Sergio Pitol, and he is a Mexican writer published by Deep Vellum in the United States, which is a Dallas, Texas publisher. And he has a trilogy that the third volume of it just came out in 2017. So that's why I'm bringing it up. And the trilogy is one book called The Art of Flight, one called The Journey, and then the new one is called The Magician of Vienna. And these are really like literary memoirs in the way that like Knausgaard is like literary memoir. But what he's doing is totally different than that, and it's much more informed by his life in literature and art and what he has read and what he has seen in the world and the people he has met in, different taverns around the world. And to me, this book, I want to read something that is written by someone better read and smarter than me. Pretty much.
That's usually the hope, right? Like what you want to read.
Right. And especially well read. Like I want to learn something from it. And Pitol is one of, he won like the Cervantes Prize. He's one of the, most celebrated writers in the Spanish language.
Cool.
And so for him to be published finally in English and have like his sort of, what I think that trilogy is really his masterpiece. You should check it out, especially if you liked, the stuff that Bolaño writes that is full of illusions.
Right.
The other one that I would mention is also came out in 2017 is Ricardo Piglia, Piglia, if you want to say it in the American way. But
sounds
Piglia,
slightly less flattering.
He actually passed away in 2017 as well. And he is Argentine, the same way that like Bolaño was Chilean. And he has a kind of alter ego called Emilio Renzi. And the first volume of his book called The Diaries of Emilio Renzi came out in 2017. And this was also published by a small publisher, a new publisher in the U.S. called Restless Books, which is out of Brooklyn, I think. And that's run by Ilan Stavans, who is a legend in Spanish language writing in general in the U.S.
Cool.
And so those books, I think there's going to be more of the volumes of Emilio Renzi's diaries to come out, but I think they're going to take a while for critics to digest. I feel like the American literature scene hasn't really even had time to digest those books being out in the world, but they are just full of literary allusions and other writers and other art. And again, if you liked Savage Detectives, I think you would like Pitol and Piglia.
Cool.
I have one more book. Do you have anything else?
Drop
I feel
it.
like I've been talking.
Drop it on us.
Well, it's a book I actually got at Christmas of 2016.
16, yeah.
And read for most of.
Oh yeah, I know where this is going.
You know what this is, and this is Bottom's Dream,
right,
by Arno Schmidt, which is a book that I've had on my desk for a solid year. So I have a reading desk in my office that I just sort of given over to this book, which I think weighs like 9 pounds. And the book is just phenomenal. And I go in that office and spend like maybe an hour here and an hour there just absorbing it. And
how
really
long does it take to read
it.
one page of that book?
Man, it varies.
It's like super intricate, ornate, weird,
but it's funny.
Page layout stuff, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, it's funny. I mean, the whole thing is written in a sort of obsolete vernacular, right?
Yeah.
It's written in a typographically weird style. I tell you what helps is there is a Twitter account, which again we'll link to in the show notes, that reposts a lot of just snippets from the book.
Oh yeah.
But if you get the right passage of it, it is hilarious. And there's a reader who and a listener of the show who I've talked to about it a little bit, and that's Ban She Beats. I want to give him a shout out. And there's not many people I know who have really spent time sitting down and reading this book.
Yeah.
So the people who have taken notes on it and have something to share, like I really value their opinion of that book. But I'm gonna again, it's sort of like The Familiar. I'm probably gonna spend like years of my life trying to read it. And it's not that it's that hard to read. It's just that there's so much of it. And
it's like how do you eat a whale? Just like one tiny bite at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a little more enjoyable than eating a whale, but again.
Oh, you're not a blubber man, Matt?
Nah, maybe, but what this reminds me of is like really bawdy, like 18th century drama. I don't know if you read like Oliver Goldsmith and stuff, where it's just, a rural setting. It's sort of archaic to begin with, and then you just get all kinds of, it's also named after Midsummer's Night Dream, right? Like Bottom's Dream is like the most like raunchy Shakespeare there is.
Yeah, it's just total bathos, right?
Yeah, total. And but I really enjoy that book, and I feel like remiss if I didn't mention it in my 2017
nice recollection
media consumption.
Cool. That sounds like a good one. So that's all the top books. Let me talk about board games for 1 minute. Okay, please obviously Netrunner is king. Like, it's been almost 3 years now, and it's still the most compelling thing that I've ever seen on a table, game wise. So if you have any interest in a 2-player card game that's set in a cyberpunk dystopian future, check it out. I got to play one game of Secret Hitler this year, which is a game that I talked about last year on the show. I don't own it, but I have a friend who has it, and we played it at the Baby Bachelor weekend that I mentioned. And it was like 8 friends or 10 friends basically accusing each other of being fascists and liars for 2 hours. And it is absolutely insane fun. People get really emotional, which is both good and bad. But if you're able to detach yourself, emotionally from like the personal relationships you have with the people you're playing with and like from the game characters, it's great. One of our listeners, Adam Schwartz, tweeted about 3 weeks ago, "Fun fact, at Dave Laird is the reason half of my family owns Secret Hitler now." And wow. I just loved that. Yeah.
That's a great compliment.
Yeah. He followed it up by saying, "My family gets visibly pissed off now if we're at a gathering and he didn't bring it." So that's cool. And then one other game that I'll mention that I got for Christmas last year but played a lot of this year is called Codenames Pictures. And it's a team game, which is really good for like 6 or more people, like 6 to 10, where you've got this grid of pictures on the board and 2 people, one from each team, is the spy master, and they have like this card that is basically the key for the board, so they know where everything is on the map, and they're trying to give clues to their team to unlock all of their correct tiles before the other team does. And it leads to just some very funny, interesting conversations after, like, okay, so I was trying to link these 2 pictures by getting at this really subtle detail on this one and then this on this other one. And people are just like, that's absurd. Why would you think that? So it like, one thing that I've heard about the reason why board games are so cool and why there's such a renaissance of them is because they really help you to get to know and enjoy your friends more. So there's this communal aspect to them, and this game Codenames Pictures, we break it out like with my parents, with other people's parents, people who are like not gamers. It's not like it's not a technical game in any way. It's like it's thinky, but it's really fun. So check out that if you're looking for something light but interesting and social. Your boys would probably be able to play it. They'd probably dig it.
Now that sounds fun.
Yeah, it's good.
I think I've told you the only board game, like bookshelf type board game that I want to get is the one that is the subject of a Roberto Bolaño novel, of course. It's called The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
I think we talked about this in the airport in Chicago a couple years ago.
It's a World War II strategy game, and I really think you and I should play it against each other.
Sure. Can you play it online? Or like through the mail? Like chess?
No. I don't know. Maybe you can play it through the mail, but it's mostly a tabletop game.
Yeah, cool. Yeah,
I was actually in a tabletop gaming store last weekend in Lawrence, Kansas.
Cool.
And if anyone has been to this store, you probably know what I mean. It has like a big Pokemon character in the front window. And there were a lot of there's like so many new games out, Dave. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, it's been a real renaissance for sure.
The shelves were just like crammed with brand new games and extension packs. And there was plenty of Netrunner for sale there.
Yeah, you saw it? Oh, yep. Good times. Did I tell you that I wrote in my critical theory class a couple years ago, I wrote a paper on the universe of Netrunner about diversity and representation of ethnicity and gender. It was fun. It was the most fun I've ever had writing a paper. Like more fun than I had writing about Infinite Jest for my thesis. Because it's like slightly less material to wade through as well.
Yeah. That's I haven't really had fun writing anything in a long time.
Yeah, it's true, man. Academic writing is just not really like something that I really enjoy. Like some of our friends, people who've been on the show, like seem to really thrive off it. You know, like Dave Herring and people like that. And for me, it's just like it's really grinding and soul crushing. I'm happy I've done it when it's over, you know, but like when I'm doing it is not my idea of a fun time.
No, it's very difficult for me.
Yeah, likewise. For sure.
Yeah, you know what I bought at that store was not a game. I bought a pack of cards that were trading cards from the show Downton Abbey.
Wow, they have those. Cool. I mean, it's not totally surprising that exists as a thing, but I mean, can you think of a more boring theme for a card game or trading cards? Here's an old white British man looking austere.
I was very excited when I found them. I totally bought them. I was like, that's what I want.
That rules. That's very cool. That's good.
It was a good 2017. Let's hope 2018 brings us some new things. Maybe we'll play some new games.
Sure.
Is 2018 the year you go to New Zealand, or is that?
Yeah, we go on the 27th of this month. Like 2 weeks, 17
what?
days. We're going.
Oh my god.
Yep. We'll
I'm
be
not
back.
Prepared, Dave.
I know, me neither. Tell me about it. Yeah, we'll come back for about a month in August, September. Spend some time in Western Canada here, and then most likely head on back down for Rachel to do her Peace and Conflict Studies PhD. So I'm very proud of her. I'm excited for this life opportunity and for what it's going to open up for her. And yeah, little Fee gets to maybe she'll have like a Kiwi accent for the first little bit of her life or something. I don't know.
Well, let's try to get in another episode before you move to another hemisphere.
For sure.
And
then the time zones get really wacky.
It's going to be really interesting. The first time we produce a show from two different hemispheres, that'll be fun. So.
Yeah. The weird thing is, like, I can't take really much with me, right? So I'm going to have to leave all my Wallace books here in Canada. So I just feel like I'll have nothing to really like reference except for what's through the internet, which could be handcuffing, but we'll see.
Do you have a Kindle? I mean, take a Kindle.
I have an iPad, so iBooks would work. That's true. Okay. Yeah. Any like resolutions for the show this year, Matt? What can listeners expect out of 2018 from the Great Concavity? We haven't talked about this much at all. But
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Hopefully some cool interviews. There's one writer that I'd really like to get on the show who shall not be named. In the event that it does happen, I think I'll just die with happiness if it does, and then we can just that can be the last episode of the show ever because we'll never have anything better.
I do have a goal. I do have a goal, and my goal is maybe a little different than yours. Since I'm in Austin, I would really like to get more into the archives of the Ransom Center.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I'm not in it already, but like talk about it more, and maybe even record from the Ransom Center.
Oh, that'd be cool.
And just deal with the archive a little bit more. So that's one of my goals.
Oh, that's good. Good thinking. I like that. And my shame will continue at having never been there.
No. There's no shame. That's no shame, man. You've done you've done more than I have done. You've been to more places. It's just one place, man. One day it'll all be online, and there's no shame.
That'll be a good day. I'll be happy for that day, for sure.
Well, that's 2017.
It's 2017. Cheers to 2018, Matt. I wish you and your family all the best, and same to all you listeners out there. Thank you guys for hanging in with us in 2017. We really appreciate all your support and all your interacting with us through email and Twitter and Instagram and other places. We love hearing from you and hearing about the ways that you're thinking about Wallace and the other things that we talk about on the show. Please continue that into this year. Like we said, we're going to link to all the stuff we said we'd link to in the show notes, and the playlists that were discussed, which have kind of the highlight song from all the albums I talked about and many others, will be something that you can check out and hopefully enjoy, and feel free to hit me up about it on Twitter, Instagram, email, wherever, and let's talk about it. We want to thank, as usual, Robin O'Neill for her art for our show, and of course the band Parquet Courts for their song Instant Disassembly. Any final thoughts, Matt?
Peace out.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you soon.